do something. A poem. Two roads diverged in the woods, and I took the road less traveled. It hurt, man! Really bad. Rocks, thorns, and glass. The parts broke. Wah! Not cool, Robert Frost. But was there no word to that? I won't be the one that leads to awesome. Like that dude Journey said, don't stop believing unless you dream stupid. Then you should get a better dream. I think that's how it goes. Get a better dream and keep going. Keep going, and keep going. Will Michael Jordan have quit? Well, he did quit. No, he retired. Yeah, that's right. He retired. But before that, in high school, what if he quit when he didn't make the team? He would have never made Space Jam. Space Jam. What will be your Space Jam? What will you create will make the world awesome? Nothing if you keep sitting there. That's why I'm talking to you today. This is your time. This is my time. It's our time. We can make every day better for each other. If we're all on the same team, let's start acting like it. We got work to do. We can cry about it, or we can dance about it. We were made to be awesome. Let's get out there. I don't know everything. I'm just a kid. I do know this. Somebody's good that gives the world a reason to dance. So get to it. Awesome. Play ball.
I got that one. So as Kid President says, you have to be awesome, right? And awesome starts with you. It's not just an overall change the world, somebody's got to do it. You have to do it, and it starts with you. And we have a great opportunity as leaders to do that now in our country as well as in our school. And so I hope that you take that responsibility firm, not lightly, and that you take it to heart. So that is all of the words of advice you will get from me. Now you'll hear from a wiser and more informed individual than I am. And I'm going to introduce him to you. 1 second. Pull up his presentation. So it is my honor to introduce you to our distinguished speaker this morning, Alan Clark. He is a West Point graduate and has an MBA from SMU. He has faithfully served his country with the armed forces through the Green Berets in Vietnam and returned from war without his legs. He'll be talking about his military career and life serving this morning, but a few highlights include he was a military intelligence officer, received a Silver Star for gallantry in action, a Purple Heart, an Air Medal, and his Combatant Infantry's badge. He's also airborne qualified. He has his CFA and is a member of Beta Gamma Sigma. His career has primarily been in finance and real estate with public service positions as well in the Texas government and in Washington, D.C. with the with the Veteran Affairs Department. He has a heart for obviously serving his country, sharing his story, and helping others understand leadership and perseverance throughout life's challenges. So you all are in for an amazing conversation this morning. Please help me in welcoming the Honorable Alan Clark.
That kid's got good moves. I'm glad to have this one above me here. Hand me my little. Is it still on the table there? Oh, here it is. Always have so many little things you got to do when you give a talk. I'm delighted to be here. I talked to a few of you all before. I would not want to bring attention to a bowl game played a few weeks ago, but at least Mean Green and Army are 1-1 for the year, which is a good deal. Army has had a horrible 20 years. We like to say beat Navy, of course, and one of my classmates years ago said, beat anyone, you know. We've had some horrible seasons in football. This is our first 8-win season in 20 years. So we've had a few little problems with recruiting, to say the least, because when the coach goes in to see the parents and talk to the young kid that might want to be in the military, the mother says, what about the war? And for West Point, the coach has to say, you're in the war. You're going to get your boots dusty in the dust bowls of the Middle East and so forth. So that's what's a little bit of our problem, but I think you all have a really wonderful team. Unfortunately, how many of you were at the bowl game? Okay, I left with 2 minutes to go. I missed all the excitement. You know, we went to get in our car and to beat the traffic and so forth, and walking swiftly back. I called one of my nephews, who's an Academy grad, who I knew was watching it on ESPN, and he called me to give me an up-to-date the last couple minutes, and so the final score. I looked down on your team. I mean, you have some huge linemen. I mean, just huge. And one guy, 6'8". I don't know what his name is, but I looked at him on the program, and I could see him there. I mean, he was like a wall. And Newt Rockne, who was a very famous coach at Notre Dame, which very few of you would know. Mouini, you remember Newt Rockne, of course. Not that you're that old, but you know, we were his name. And by the way, my wife has a book for Linda Mouini. You're going to see your sister-in-law next week. She has a book for her. Linda knows that Linda. Excuse me for that commercial. I didn't know if he'd leave early or something, so I had to get it taken care of. But Newt Rockne said one time, prayers are great for football games, but massive linemen really have a lot to do with it. Prayers being answered, and you all sure have that. Since the beginning of recorded history, mankind has struggled for survival based on the security and strength of his weaponry and his own wits. Civilization and people who achieve the greatest successes typically accomplish their progress because they developed technology, which was advanced compared to others. To become and remain a strong people and preserve their freedom, structured environment with good leadership is essential. Now, if any of you have not read what Joshua Chilton of your school that founded in 1890 has to say right across the hall here on that big glass wall, read it. Gave me a great sense of pride relative to Texas. I was born in Texas and raised in Texas and been out of the state a lot, but I've always been very proud of Texas. And when you read that, it should make you proud, whether you're from Texas or not, relative to what we try to do in Texas. Enlightened and courageous leadership is needed in all areas of endeavor: law, government, defense, military, medicine, science, engineering, communication, management of information, accounting, education, commerce, management of space in our cities, agriculture, manufacturing, and transportation. Hopefully you all will become leaders in one of those areas. And if you're going to become a leader in something that's not on this list, I want to know about it, because it must be a new industry. The basic principles of good leadership never change because basic human nature never changes in every facet of our lives. However, prior to having others follow us, which we learned very quickly at the military academy in a leadership course, and just by what we did every day, relates to certain basic characteristics we must follow: discipline, order, conviction, purpose, goals, and vision, education, and wisdom. Above all, wisdom and vision are needed to produce the creativity needed for the greater technological edge we need to succeed in both a competitive and dangerous world. Now, the competitive world that we're in relative to cyber warfare is very important. Those of you who are going into IT, or you're going to use everybody uses IT today. I don't use it as much as I like to. I'm in my 75th year, and I'm not what you call real high tech. So I have a luncheon group, and I just mark whether people are coming or not coming, or whether they paid. Some guy said, "Don't you use Excel?" I said, "I know what it is." That's about it, you know. And talk about goals. Now, I had a goal at the beginning of the year to lose 10 pounds. Only 15 to go. I will focus on 3 areas in my talk: ethics, emotional intelligence, which I also call emotional quotient, EQ, and servant leadership. Those are 3 of the elements of which this PLP is based on. That is the challenge which I will give you. Help build your world and our country. I challenge you to be not just leaders, but leaders of character. There are three kinds of people in the world. Leaders make things happen. We people with a military background like to think we're in this group. Others watch things happen. The third group wonders what happened. I almost did not have a chance to be any of these three in my adulthood. Let me start with my story as a soldier in the Vietnam War. I want to start with the first one, please. Okay. Here I was on a training patrol holding an enemy weapon called an AK-47. Turn around. Hold up. Right here. Ben, you better give me another one. This one isn't very strong. Do you have one, or is there one on there? It doesn't matter. Anyway, the weapon I'm holding is a Chinese AK-47. It doesn't matter. Yeah, thank you. Done a great job. I had been raised in a military family in which even before I became a cadet at West Point, I had been raised to live by a personal honor code, which was also my code as a cadet and officer. It has always been my goal to live by that, and that is that I would never lie, cheat, nor steal. And at West Point, we had an honor code in which we were required to report those that lied, cheated, or stole. The ones that did not live up to our standards. Our motto at West Point is duty, honor, country. And this is the ethics content of my commitment comments to you today. When I live by these standards, I sleep soundly at night because I do not need to be looking over my shoulder for someone catching up with me for something that I have done wrong that day. I consider this photo my attitude photo. It was a few months before I was wounded, and I have to say I lost my attitude when I got hurt so badly in Vietnam. I was an intelligence officer in Army Special Forces. One of the jobs I had was debriefing a defector from Cambodia. I lived with and trained young anti-communists from Cambodia, the country directly west of Vietnam. And in the spring of 1967, I reported to a very isolated camp deep in enemy territory. Next. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's next. First thing I did when I got there was I had a 12-man security force of Montagnards. These are the native people that are about this tall in South Vietnam, or what they call mountain tribal people, like the Native Americans of the United States. And this was my interpreter. He spoke several dialects of these different tribal languages. My mission was to collect information on the enemy in my area. I would go into friendly villages, and my recruiter on the right there would talk to the visitors. Can we lower the lights except for here, Ben? Can you all, would it be better if the lights were dimmed a little bit? Yeah, dim the lights, Ben, then just make sure I can see. That helps. The major lights. Save electricity. I'll keep talking. We wanted to have them become spies for us to go into Cambodia, back to their old villages and so forth. I mentioned I debriefed that defector. I'll digress and mention the defector was a Cambodian officer, and he was murdered in very strange circumstances a few months after I left country. The Special Forces officer that replaced me in my unit went to Fort Leavenworth Disciplinary Barracks for 15 months. He was involved with the CIA, so he was absolved of the crime, or at least let out of prison. So it was a very interesting time to be debriefing a man who had been at Moscow in what's called the Patrice Lumumba University, which was their school for counter-revolutionaries during the Cold War. What are my qualifications? I've had experiences in observing leadership styles, good and bad, and my own leadership opportunities in many arenas of our society, and I will touch on some of those in my presentation. You can hear leadership lectures until you're blue in the face, and I will give you some specific information, but first I will let you in on a major secret of success in being a leader. Now, the kinds of positions I've been in, I was in the trust investments department of a large bank down in Dallas called Republic National Bank, which doesn't exist anymore. It's been bought out 2 or 3 times and so forth. I have run some small oil industry companies in Midland, Texas. I've had my own real estate investment company where I raised money for limited partnerships for managing existing apartment buildings. And Unfortunately, it was a very bad time in Texas, which was the 80s. Of course, you all know about IQ, okay? The measure of your intelligence quotient. I talk to young people from time to time, and I ask the high schoolers about EQ, and only a couple raised their hand about EQ, of course, which is intelligence quotient, emotional intelligence. Emotional stability or emotional quotient is one of the keystones of emphasis in your PLP, and I believe it and ethics may be the most crucial factors in your leadership success. The higher a leader moves up the ladder, the more important it becomes. Don't forget that. People, emotions, your emotions and their emotions, the people you deal with. Barbara Tuchman was a very eminent historian whom I met in 1959 with about 10 students at the prep school that I went to in New Hampshire, and I was a junior there. She wrote one time in Esquire magazine that differences in success relate to an understanding of the passions and the emotions. Ambition, unrest, discontent, deceitfulness, fear, face-saving, the instinct to dominate, the needs of the ego, the whole bundle of personal vanities and anxieties, end quote. These all relate to strengths or detriments to our soul, which is our mind and our emotions and our will. You know, we are made up of three things: body, soul, mind, emotions, and will, and spirit. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about spirit later. Just yesterday I went to my reading stack and I found an article by Amy Freyer written 6 years ago in which she was titled Creating an Emotionally Intelligent Warrior. She'd been in the military. She said, research has shown that almost 90% of the competencies necessary for leadership success are social and emotional in nature, not technical skills as previously assumed. In his best-selling book, Emotional Intelligence, Daniel Goleman observed that emotional intelligence can be as powerful and at times more powerful than IQ as a determinant of successful performance. So learn your techniques in whatever you're learning, the intricacies of the field you're going into, but remember, people make the world go round, not machines. America's military, she said, requires emotionally intelligent leaders who possess not only the ability to manage anxiety and frustrations, stay motivated and control impulses, but also the ability to keep fear and distress from swamping the ability to think. These emotional skills are critical to decision-making under conditions of stress. When you get into business, you're going to lose accounts. You're going to say something inopportune at a staff meeting or to your boss. The marketing plan is going to go bad. The research that you've been spending months on may not pan out the way you need. The formulas don't work. Those are going to be stress factors for you, okay? There's going to be stress in your life. Emotional quotient, getting back to square one and balance in your soul, is very important. So keep that in mind as you're working through your issues. It's not a question of whether you have problems or not, or challenges to solve. You will have them. The question is, how balanced do you stay to address the issue? When a person really understands that humans are directed by the above emotions and passions, including themselves, then they can become a person who can overcome turkey behavior and soar with the eagles as a wise leader. Allow me to return to that life's pathway that put me in that special forces camp on that fateful day in 1967 in the Central Highlands of Vietnam. I had lived in Virginia as a teenager, and I'd also lived in Japan, as I mentioned to somebody back here that's in attendance, and soaked up our early American history. As a young patriot, hopefully proud of our American history, which definitely was the case for me, were 4 guidelines by which I directed my young life and have guided me ever since. Number 1, goal setting. I started out as a young person and I was going to make things happen for me. I was going to be in that first category. I set high goals early for service to my country, not to amass wealth. That's a good thing because I haven't, okay? However, I accept that many of you entering the workforce do desire to amass wealth. That's okay. This is a worthy goal as long as when you're in the process of that, you maintain standards of ethics and character, do not cut corners, and do not take advantage of others, especially those who help make you a success on your teams of endeavor. You must always hearken back to being a leader who serves those entrusted to you. It is commendable to build wealth. That is part and parcel of our free enterprise and entrepreneurial spirit of America. I decided to attend West Point at age 8. Man, I had a goal early in life that I worked toward. I studied hard. I prepared myself. And I entered the academy at age 17 after my junior year in high school, folks. I was the youngest man in my class of 760 students, scared to death being the youngest guy in the class. I hadn't even had a chance, I wouldn't have been, but being a big man on campus, I didn't even have that chance as a 12th grader. My parents lived in Hawaii. I wanted to resign. I wanted to go do surfing on the beach at Waikiki, but I stayed in the academy and didn't resign. I said, well, why should I put up with this? But I remembered I had a goal when I was 8 years old. I graduated in 1963. I was still the youngest guy because nobody else had come in. At 504, we lost 1 out of 3 cadets. Number 2, set high standards. Sometimes when you set up high standards for yourself, you're going to face derision and judgment by your peers and others. Accept that, but do not allow yourself to be taken down from trying to set your standards up. Act above the crowd with your standards, but do not leave the crowd. Work harder than others, but also smarter. Be aware of personal appearance and look the part of a leader. Linda, would you bring me water, please? I need to introduce my partner in life. Stand up, Linda. That's why I wanted you to bring the water. This is my wife, Linda. I hope those of you that are married or may consider getting married someday are able to say, when you introduce your spouse, this is the love of my life, because she is. Be aware of your personal appearance and look the part of a leader. The following story is an example of setting standards for yourself to meet. Eileen Collins, Space Shuttle Commander of Columbia in 1999 and Discovery 2005, expressed it this way. When I was a young child, my father drilled one thing into my mind over and over again. Do what you want to do, whatever you think is right. Don't follow the pack. That's tough advice for a teenager, but it's what made me take flying lessons when I was 19. I've never really wondered what my father's motivation was to tell me that. I do know that he was astonished that I went into the military to fly airplanes and become an astronaut. Number 3, become a student of history. Personally, I always wanted to know not only what happened and when and who was involved, but why. Why people exerted their emotional quotient and intelligence to make those decisions. What were the lessons to be learned to make me a better citizen, person, and leader? Historian David McCullough was interviewed on traits of top leaders. This is what he said. We need leaders and not just political leaders. We need leaders in every field, in every institution, in all kinds of situations. We need to be educating our young people to be leaders, and unfortunately that's fallen out of fashion. This program is something that is not out of fashion at this school and in this program, and I compliment the school, and I compliment the leaders, and I compliment you for being a part of it. This is part of why you are in this institution of higher education and a special program. He was asked, McCullough, why do you think it's so important for a leader to have what they call a sense of history? He answered, I like to remind people of something General George C. Marshall said. He was the general in World War II that was in charge of the entire war effort for the United States and the Allies in Europe and in Asia. Asked once whether they had a good education at the Virginia Military Institute, he said no, because we had no training in history. He knew that a sense of history is essential to anyone who wants to be a leader. You know, not just history of your company, the people that you're going to be involved with, but history of what made this great land what it is today, so you had your business opportunities in this free enterprise system. So what is a starting point to remind us of the history of this great land of ours? I always like to talk about this. If you are a citizen of this great land or desire to be employed in this country, because I presume you're not all necessarily citizens of the United States, it's important to know about our history and why we are so powerful by any standard of measurement. In May 2008, I toured the Freedom Trail in New England. I met the Reverend Gary Marks of the Church of the Pilgrimage in Plymouth, Massachusetts, located just 200 yards where the Pilgrims set foot on land in 1620. He wrote in a pamphlet titled Pilgrims Then and Now that what motivated the Pilgrims when they came here from Europe, and I am all in agreement with these thoughts, by the way, quote, the Pilgrims reflected a heroic and persistent struggle to realize their dreams of living as a self-determining people. They had a belief in freedom of conscience and self-expression, values which would be a part of a later full-fledged democracy. And that's part of what has made us strong, militarily and economically and financially and business-wise. This is the full-fledged democracy and representative republic in which you today enjoy the great freedoms and stability in our land, a peaceful transfer, more or less peaceful, a few little protesters out there, but a peaceful transfer of government yesterday in Washington, D.C. And there didn't have to be a coup. There didn't have to be the presidential guard going in and picking up the dictator or the president, somebody else changing it. Remember that anything worth having in this life will only be maintained through hard work, cognizance of where we came from in this country, through blood, sweat, and tears of those who have gone before us across this land, and your own recognition and responsibility for its preservation. We, the generation who served this country before you, ask you to keep the flame of liberty burning in our land. Never again give in to evil or laziness or acceptance of the status quo. Take your responsibilities as citizens very seriously. Study history, not only in your career field, but of our country and the reason we have the freedoms that we have in this land. William Bradford, the author of Plymouth Plantation, wrote, all great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties and must be both enterprised and overcome with answerable courage, end quote. Will you be the future leaders of our land to answer the call of preservation with your own courage as a reflection of your integrity? Number 4, maintain high standards of personal honor. Some people value success by assets and cars and big homes. Thank goodness I didn't judge my success by that. However, I judge success by character. In the 1840s, a Frenchman, Alexis de Tocqueville, traveled and wrote about America and what made us a success. He described the secret to the greatness of America this way, a prophetic statement. I sought for the greatness and genius of America in fertile fields and boundless forests. It was not there. I sought for it in her free schools and her institutions of learning. It was not there. I sought for it in her matchless Constitution and democratic Congress. It was not there. Not until I went to the churches of America and found them aflame with righteousness did I understand the greatness and genius of America. America is great because overall America is good. When America ceases to be good, America will cease to be great, end quote. He was talking about character, integrity, and morality for our whole nation. These attributes are only as good as each of us uphold them personally. You must do the same, or we are doomed for our civilization. I visited Valley Forge near Philadelphia in 2006 and learned of the story of General George Washington, who would not go into a warm building on the campus at Valley Forge until 700 huts were built for his troops. And he lost 1 out of 3 to disease and the cold weather up there, some without clothes, some without shoes, in a cold winter in Pennsylvania. That's what is character and taking care of those you lead and manage. That's servant leadership in our history. Learn the tasks and responsibilities of those entrusted to your leadership. Learn by walking around. It's called management by walking around, MBWO. Learn what your people do. Don't just sit up in your little ivory tower if you can get there, or your management office out in the corner with a nice view and so forth. Get down to where your people are working. Find out what they do and how they do it. Learn their tasks and responsibilities. Care for your people, their needs and their aspirations. If somebody in your company wants to do something else besides what they're doing, you help them improve themselves.